Ryan Kurzak of Asheville Vedic Astrology here. It's been a while, but I've been doing some research and study deeper into Jaimini Upadesa Sutras. And I've been using these techniques for around 2 years now with great accuracy. And it seemed like a good time to start sharing some of these ideas so that you can look at your own chart and see if you can make sense of your chart through the eye of Jaimini astrology. Now, on my website, AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, I am currently doing a series of short articles specifically on topics that deal with Jaimini Sutras, particularly certain Jaimini dashas. But today, we're going to look at a topic called Argala. And this is a wonderful technique that you can use to get a sense of what areas of life are supported within your chart. Now, there are numerous ways that you can assess this, but this is a good snapshot technique that can allow you to go through each house, each point within your chart to get a sense of, is there a strength, a karmic strength, pinned to my destiny? And why do I use those words, pinned to my destiny? Because the term Argala itself means something that is pinned to your destiny. It's like a wooden pin. And there are certain points, certain places within the chart that if there are planets there, it will indicate karmas that are essentially part of your fate, for good or for bad. And when we start to see this, we can understand why possibly certain yogas don't give their effects when we expect them to be great. Because along with this idea of Argala, there's an idea of what's called obstructors, which means that you can have an Argala for success in a certain area of life. But if on the other side of the chart there's an obstructor to that particular point, well, you end up spending your time on what that planet represents rather than what the Argala itself represents. So first off, what do we have to do? We have to understand, how do we find Argala? And so we'll share that today. And there are numerous aspects to this idea of Argala that I'm not able to capture in a very short video. So what I'd like to recommend for you to do is, if you do find this subject fascinating, I recommend studying Jaimini Upadesa Sutras, Ernst Wilhelm's book. I'll put a link to that at the bottom of this video, as well as his classes on Jaimini astrology. He has 3 classes, and Argala specifically is covered in the first class, so I'll put a link to that as well in case you want to explore that. And that's a wonderful MP3 audio course where you can get in-depth understanding of Jaimini beyond Argala. But for the specifics of Argala, going beyond the generalities that we're going to approach today, you want to explore these educational routes. So first of all, how do we find Argala? Well, I've got this chart over here to help us understand. Argala can occur from any point within the chart. And we'll start by considering Argala from the ascendant. Because if we have Argala from the ascendant, that will tell us that there's a certain power in regards to how our life path will unfold. And we can determine what that power is by the innate nature of the planet creating Argala, as well as the house lords from those planets. Okay, let's start. So first of all, Argala is formed in the 2nd house, the 4th house, and the 11th house from the point in question. For example, in the ascendant here, if we go to the 2nd house, this would be an Argala forming position. However, this is a node of the moon. This is not an embodied planet. So for our purposes, we're not going to consider Argala from the nodes, or that the nodes cause Argala. They do contribute to Argala in certain other ways, but again, you need to study the sutras specifically, go in a little more detail with Jaimini before we try to tackle that. So it occurs in the 2nd. So if there was an embodied planet here, and why do I say embodied? Because the sun, the moon, Mercury, Jupiter, these are all things that you could take a rocket ship out to and see and land on. The nodes of the moon are not embodied. They're points in space where eclipses occur. We go on along, and we see that in the 4th house from the ascendant, we have Venus and Sun. which are two embodied planets. And the placements again are the second house, the fourth house, and the 11th house. So we see that this chart does have Argala in the fourth house. Now we go on around and we see that Saturn is also in the 11th house, which means that from the ascendant, this chart has Argala in the fourth house as well as in the 11th house. So we know that there's going to be support to this person's life path in relationship to Venus and Sun in the fourth, what that means, and we'll discuss that here briefly, as well as Saturn in the 11th. Now, why the second, fourth, and 11th? Well, the second house deals with resources that we have, resources that we manage. So if we have resources that are getting supported by an embodied planet through Jaimini's principles, we know that we're going to have the funds or the resources or whatever it is it takes to be successful on this life path. The fourth house deals with the foundation of the chart, the emotional maturity of the chart, which allows a person to make the best of their life path, because it's the fourth house. The 11th house deals with the capacity to fulfill desires, to feel like we are able to achieve our dreams. So if there's planets in the 11th, that's going to give us a capacity to do that. Again, in regards to the nature of the planet in question. Now, there is some controversy and some debate because there's another Argala position. We're not going to go into that and try to decide which one it is today because of the controversy. In Jaimini, there's a reference to the trine also creating Argala. Some say it's the 9th house which creates the Argala. Some say it's the 5th house which creates the Argala. If you want to explore that on your own, again, see Ernst Wilhelm's class. He goes into that and the reasons why. And I tend to agree with his approach in this regard. But for now, you have enough to just consider the 2nd, the 4th, and the 11th from the ascendant. Okay. Now, we see here that there are also obstructors, or Virodina planets. And these obstructors, they cause you to get derailed from the success that the Argala promises. And what are the obstructors? Well, the obstructors occur in the 3rd, the 12th, and the 10th houses. And it runs like this. So if you have a planet in the 2nd house causing Argala, and you have a planet in the 12th, the planet in the 12th is going to obstruct the 2nd. So if there was a planet causing Argala here in the 2nd, we would have Mars obstructing that. And how would it obstruct it? It would be based on what that karma means of having Mars in the 12th, ruling the 5th and the 12th house. Those things would get in the way of the person's resources. We see in this chart that the 4th, the Argala in the 4th, is obstructed. The Virodina is coming from the 10th because there is a planet in the 10th. So it's going to obstruct this Argala. Now there's also Argala, as we see, in the 11th house. And the obstructor to the 11th house Argala will come from the 3rd house. But again, as we see in this chart, there's no planets in the 3rd, so this Argala in the 11th is not obstructed. Now, let's follow this again. 2nd house creates Argala. If there's a planet in the 12th, that planet will obstruct the Argala. Next, we see that the 11th house creates Argala. If there's a planet in the 3rd, that planet will obstruct that Argala. And we go again, Argala in the 4th house, which there is in this chart. And if there's a planet in the 10th, which there is in this chart, this will cause an obstruction to the Argala. So if you notice the pattern here, if I could, I don't have this set up to actually draw on here, but if I could draw a line from the 2nd to the 12th, you'd see this connection. And then you'd see another diagonal line here, and another diagonal line here. So you can get an image in your mind. You can memorize it, that the obstructors are in the 3rd, the 12th, and the 10th houses. You can just memorize it. And the Argalas occur in the 2nd, the 4th, and the 11th. You can memorize that too. Or you can just visualize this kind of cross line here, which will allow you to see what's obstructing what. And I particularly chose this chart because it's easier to see this when you're looking at it from one of the dual signs here. This is a Sagittarius ascendant. So now what does that mean in obstructor? That means that you'll get more caught up in the energies of the obstructing planet than the success you might have with the Argala. But there's another rule that says if there are more planets in the Argala position versus the obstructing position, you will still have problems from the obstructing planet, but there's more strength to the Argala, so that Argala will be stronger and prevail. The opposite is true as well. If this sign of Virgo here would have had another embodied planet, then there would have been competition, which could actually cancel out the Argala, depending on the strength of the dignities and so on. If there were 3 planets here, it would definitely cancel out the Argala. And the whole idea behind this is that the Argalas are those planetary energies which are going to help you move forward in your life. So things that are pinned to your destiny, to move your destiny forward. The obstructing planets are those things that get in the way, that might derail you, pull you away from that kind of success. And you can see that all the time. Maybe a person wants to be a famous writer, and they're working for years on end, writing, and then they get married and they have kids, and maybe the Argala planet represents kids, and so having the kids derails them from their capacity to focus on their career. Sometimes you see people who get derailed by their spouse, or derailed by their hobbies. These sorts of things can all come into play. So the Argala can give us a sense of what are the strengths, what are the things that are pinned to our destiny, the karmas that are strong, and if there are obstructors, what's going to get in the way. And as you know, I don't like to use astrology as fatalistic, although sometimes it is hard to go against the tides of the planets. But if you can see that something's going to get in the way, you can consciously choose to not put your attention there. That's going to be very hard. You're going to really want to do it, and unconsciously you're just going to get pulled into it. But if you have enough self-awareness, you can focus more on the Argala planets than on the obstructing planets. You just have to know what they are first, which is the joy of Vedic astrology, because this is about self-knowledge. Now, as I mentioned, the impact of the Argala is dependent on what the planet's innate nature represents, as well as what is its house lord. What houses does it rule? And let's just consider this here. So we have Venus and Sun in the 4th house. Now we know that Venus by its very nature represents luxuries, represents vehicles. And Venus here in Pisces is exalted, which can show that part of this person's support in life is going to be the fact that they're going to have wealth, or they're going to have more luxuries. And we can see this from other areas of the chart too. For example, we have the 2nd house lord, Saturn, exalted in the 11th. The 2nd house deals with finances, resources. The 11th is also a financial house. So having this kind of combination here, as well as having the 11th lord exalted, it's true, this chart represents a person who's extremely wealthy. So what is part of this person's Argala but wealth? Wealth, luxuries, good vehicles, and a sense of contentment with it. Why? Because Venus allows a person to feel comforted and to feel comfortable. So they have a good, strong, solid foundation to move forward because they're not contending with difficult emotions. Now we also see that this person will be heavily involved in educational matters and even political matters. Political because Venus deals with politics. It also, the 11th lord deals with social networks and politics, so that's adding to the Argala. And the Sun rules the 9th house, which is an educational house. The 9th is also said to deal with legal issues. Going into the 4th is also a house that deals with education. So we can see that part of this person's path does deal with politics, does deal with education, does deal with supporting one's own culture. So this is all going to be pinned to the person's destiny. This is a fairly strong Argala. Now, what's the problem? Well, we have this Virodina planet, this obstructing planet, the moon. in the 10th. And what does the 10th represent? Particularly a full moon. How do we know it's full? Because it's directly across from the sun. And a moon can only be full when it's directly across from the sun. If the moon would have been in the houses near the sun, it's a new moon. But the moon deals with popularity. Now, if popularity is going to obstruct something in your life, how could it do that? Well, it could be that fame gets in the way, that fame causes suffering, and we see that all the time. It could be that jealousy gets in the way, and this is what happened here in this chart. And we need to consider what house does the moon rule. It rules the 8th house, which deals with scandal. It deals with instability with one's fame and popularity. And these are the things that have gotten in the way of their emotional contentment, their connection with their family, have gotten in the way of their wealth from time to time. But it's okay, because the Argala is stronger. And there's an Argala in the 11th house, which means that yes, there's an obstructor there. It's still going to cause problems. But the support of the Argalas make it work anyway. If it would have been reversed and there would have been more Virodina planets than Argala planets, then the tables would have been turned, and they would have tried to go forward with their political career and focusing on education and educational matters. And they would have tried, because that's part of their destiny to do that, but they probably would have failed unless other factors were canceling it out because of the obstructing influences. So this is how we can see Argala. And you can do this from any house within the chart. For example, go a little bit further. If we want to check Argala from the 10th house, 10th house deals with what? Career, status, fame. Well, we go through the same process. We choose to look at this 10th house of Virgo as though it is the ascendant, because we want to check it from this 10th position. So we go to the 2nd. We see that there is a planet in the 2nd, but we need to see, is that Argala getting canceled by a planet in the 11th? Well, there are no embodied planets in the 11th. So for our purposes right now, again, remembering that there are other aspects to Argala that we can't cover in this short amount of time, but for now we can consider that this is an Argala. It's not canceled. We need to see, are there planets in the 11th? Well, there's Rahu, but there's no embodied planets. So we don't have Argala from the 11th. Next, we check to see, is there Argala in the 4th? Well, the 4th house from the 10th, there's no planets, so there's no Argala. If there was a planet there, it probably would have gotten canceled out by this Jupiter, because Jupiter, remember, is one of the Virodina planets, one of the obstructors, since it's in the 10th. So again, Argalas occur in the 2nd, the 11th, and the 4th houses. The obstructors occur in the 12th, the 3rd, and the 10th house. And they obstruct in that order. So it's not that a planet in the 10th will obstruct Argala in the 2nd. Planet in the 10th will only obstruct Argala in the 4th, and so on. And so from this chart, we see from the career that there is Argala in the 2nd house, and it's Saturn, it's exalted, which tells us that from the career, what's going to be one of the things that helps to support the resources of this career, the status to move forward? Well, it's weathering hardships. It's enduring. It could also be success from benefiting from one's enemies. Why? Because Saturn rules the 6th house. The 5th house. This can be an intelligent use of one's mind, again, to provide resources so that one can be successful as one moves forward with one's career. And this is supported from the chart. So Argala is a very simple technique. If you just memorize the basics, you can learn a lot from a chart, because you can do it from every single house. And how do you, again, determine what it represents, what it means? Well, it's based on what does it mean to have Venus in the 4th? What does it mean to have the Sun in the 4th? Venus ruling the 6th, Venus ruling the 11th, the Sun ruling the 9th. That karma means something, so you do have to know how to read a chart first. But if you see planets in those positions, then you know that those things represented by the planets are going to cause Argala and are going to support that path. If it's from the ascendant, it's the life path in general, or even the physical body. If it's from the 10th, it deals with career and status and fame. if it's from the 7th house, that can give Argala in relationship to relationships, partnerships, the wife, the spouse. Sometimes you might find that Argalas don't work the way you think. Again, this is why I want you to do a little more detailed study, because even there's Viparit Argala, and that would be when there's a malefic planet in the 3rd, only a malefic planet in the 3rd, or more malefic planets in the 3rd. And if we're going from the 10th here, we'd see that Mars is in the 3rd from the 10th, so that would create a Viparit Argala. Rahu, or Ketu particularly, can reverse Argala based on its position. Again, this is something you need to study on your own. Again, see the links below for good classes on this. And that's why Rahu and Ketu are so important with Argala, because let's say that you have Argala from the ascendant or from a position, and then you've got Ketu in that position. It will reverse the way you look at Argala, the way you calculate it. And that can be very good or very bad, because if it's very good, then you, in a sense, you can get double Argalas, meaning you get it from 2 different vantage points, and they come together in confluence, which is very good. It can be very bad because then it can cancel out Argala from other positions. So that's why when people are ruled by the nodes of the moon or have a prominent Ketu on the ascendant or Rahu on the ascendant, that can make them really great, or it can make them really tore down. It's Rahu and Ketu have that polarizing effect in that regard, and it shows in relation to Argala as well. So this is a lot. Probably want to review this video a few times so you can get a sense of what it means. And again, see the links below to Mr. Wilhelm's book. See the link to his class. That way you can get a really detailed understanding of how Argala works beyond just this introduction. This introduction will serve you well. Okay, it might be a little while before I'm able to do some more videos as I'm working on the Jaimini Sutras notes on my blog, AstralVedicAstrology.com, and also working on a Yoga Sutras class, webinar that we're doing live. So aside from sessions and writing, having to take a little bit of a break from these videos. But I wanted to share this with you because I think it's a fascinating technique. It works very well, and it doesn't take a whole lot to understand it. You might think it's more tedious than anything else, but once you get the basics of it, you can really apply it from anywhere, any position. All right, so be well, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.